Brilliant ideas, powered by Hyundai Motor.
Kimi wa shishite iba, tamashii wa fuyo no kumo no ue o. Saredo kimi to ware, mikushimi to ai no, hate naki hate ni. Niji no hikari no kona ni mamirete, tsutoha ni kiete sari no. 私は前衛芸術家として一生貫いてきた草間であります。
Japanese artist Yayoi Kusama is best known for her inexhaustible creations involving polka dots, pumpkins, and vibrant colours. Her love of design has seen her join forces with top fashion houses, creating her own ranges. She's also designed videos for the best in the pop world. Now in her 9th decade, Kusama continues to create every single day. Her art as productive as when she first broke onto the world stage in the 1960s.
Everybody loves Yayoi Kusama. I think she transcends any borders.
She shares her inner thoughts. She invites you into her world.
She's one of the most famous, active, and living artists in this world.
She's somebody who kind of rode every wave, but has always remained absolutely on top and uniquely herself. Although she's associated with surrealism, pop, installation, performance, she can't be confined to any kind of recognizable category within art. She's definitely one of the 20th and 21st century's truly unique artists.
Kusama's work can increasingly be seen at exhibitions around the globe. Museums are queuing up to show her work. This retrospective tour, in Infinity, has travelled from Denmark via Norway and Sweden to its final stop in Finland's capital, Helsinki, and it's already clocked up over 500,000 visitors.
The artist allows the audience to take pictures here, to post them on the internet, on Facebook, on Instagram, is something that especially the Finns, who are very digital as a nation, very much appreciate. And by sharing and letting people share the exhibition, Kusama is spreading the word into infinity, into the endless world of the internet. And slowly people have become familiar with her polka dots, and here they're becoming familiar with work I don't think they'd ever imagined that she'd have done.
At the same time the Nordic nations queue for tickets, Kusama's grip on her audience extends even wider, with free exhibitions in Sharjah in the Middle East and in London.
There were queues outside the gallery every single day for up to 4 hours. It just has such universal appeal. We had a lot of people come here who had never been to the gallery, and I suspect for some people they'd never even been to an art gallery. So it was really interesting to see people's reactions to the work. And it seems to appeal to children, much older people, but also it appeals to academics and art historians, people who have a very full knowledge of art history.
Yayoi Kusama lives and works in Tokyo, Japan. Home is a psychiatric hospital, where she's lived for 40 years with a lifelong condition of panic attacks and hallucinations.
そしてまた私の作品をご覧になった方々が私の生涯をかけての命をかけた芸術の背後にある自分の人生の愛と平和に対する熱烈なる命の限りの私の生き様をご覧くだされば、私としてはこれに勝る感激はありません。
She used this hospital as a place to live, but it had the freedom to go to the studio. So for her, it's kind of natural workplace and living place.
Yayoi Kusama is somebody like a lot of artists who needs her anxieties and obsessions, and she has managed them in a way that's absolutely brilliant and speaks of a very ordered and organised personality.
She stayed there because it gives her great comfort. I mean, it's a very simple place. This is not some fancy hospital or anything. She works every day, and she tells me that she doesn't sleep, that she actually works all night.
She's a person who needs to make art every day of her life. There's a sense of both continuity but also repetition to her work. And I think that's partly what motivates her. It's that repetition of making something and doing something over and over that keeps her going.
She expresses that her work really comes from her head, from her feelings, from what she sees, from her fears.
I was very privileged to be able to watch her working. What was extraordinary about the way she worked is that she had the blank canvas, which had been painted with a ground colour, and it was on a table. She put her brush into paint and she leant over the work, and she almost sort of went momentarily into a trance. And then she started painting with absolute confidence, and she didn't stop. She knew where the line was taking her, and it was this sort of like emergence of this extraordinary vision, sort of from nowhere, with no planning. She covered the canvas.
When you visit her, it's almost like a piece of theatre, and she'll be sitting there. She will be wearing her wig, and she'll be wearing a dress which is made by her, which includes dots or pumpkin patterns. Sometimes there'll be work behind her which matches the pattern in her dress, and she'll often be drawing. So you have to just stand there quietly and observe her drawing, and then she'll look up, and the meeting begins.
Yayoi Kusama's love of pattern and repetition may stem from an unhappy childhood when she wrote and painted to ward off anxieties. She was born in 1929 to a conservative family who owned a seed farm. Like other Japanese schoolchildren during the Pacific War, Kusama was put to work planting crops.
私はかぼちゃが大好きです。なぜならばそのユーモアに満ちた容姿、そしてまたかぼちゃの持っている温かさ、そして人間的な接触感のあるような素晴らしい形、そういったものに対する私の感動を芸術に表そうと思ってたくさんのかぼちゃの絵を描きました。かぼちゃに対する私の創作に対する願いというものは限りもなく続き、今もまだ子供の時のように私は今もかぼちゃの作品を作り続けております。
Kusama's desire to become an artist was fought hard by her parents. They piled pressure on her to be settled and marry a businessman with high social status, the same fate as her older sister.
反対して朝から晩まで絵描いてるので、絵を投げつけて、それから絵の具箱をみんなひっくり返して、母はね、もうね、絵描いてるんだったらね、うちに帰ってこないでくださいって言われたの。
Kusama realised that if she desired to become a contemporary artist, she had to escape from her family life and her homeland too. During the 1950s, she pursued her dream of moving to America, the land of the free. Japanese artist Yayoi Kusama is famous for her colourful paintings, her repetitive patterns, her polka dots and pumpkins. She's also known for her anxiety disorders. In the 1950s, Kusama began a surprising correspondence with America's most famous female artist. Georgia O'Keeffe would become her benefactor. Through her recommendations, Kusama travelled to the United States and began to show her paintings. Her destiny was New York City, at that time the centre of the art world.
New York would have been a world away from the strictures of Japanese society for women. You know, New York would have offered her the freedom for her to be able to practice and essentially create any kind of art that she wanted.
New York gave her so much opportunity to work or express as artist. And it's true, she does so many things in New York.
She had the studio in the same building as Don Judd, and she would not socialize that much. She knew that in order to get ahead, you had to scratch and you had to push yourself and make yourself available, and she was willing to do anything to be famous. But women didn't have it easy when she was there.
It was a really, really tough time for her. She famously had a door which she slept on in her studio as a bed. She had no heating in her studio. She often couldn't pay the rent, and she'd get thrown out of the studio and all her work would be thrown onto the street.
Kusama soon realised that in order to make her name, she had to be unique. Her series of infinity net paintings were original and obvious labours of love. Compositions without a centre, they featured intricate and uniform semicircles of paint on a black background, the pattern covering the void. Kusama's described these net paintings as curtains separating me from people and reality. As her infinity nets began to sell, Kusama strode forward to create groundbreaking installations.
In the 1960s, the abstract expressionists were becoming second-rate, and the pop artists have taken over. And we were fighting a pop art all the time. She was very ambitious. The first show, you know, we had a gallery in a basement, and it was all painted black. And this big, beautiful boat full of white penises. It was very, very impressive, and she was a tiny little Japanese girl of this powerful work. But this was a unique early piece, and it was like nothing else that we had seen in New York. She had really invented her own style.
Kusama's hand-stitched and stuffed soft sculptures became a prolific body of work known as her accumulation series. The desire to be avant-garde led Kusama to expose her own fear and obsession with sex.
In many ways, these soft sculptures became ciphers for her own mental state. She talks about this idea of infinity, and she talks a lot about her early experiences with sex, actually, in her poetry.
The stuffed, curious, phallic-looking objects, and in one sense they speak to a kind of almost hysterical obsession with sex, but they're also very curious and uncanny and unsettling objects. So I think that those works really spoke of her fears as a young Japanese woman from a very conservative, traditional background, finding her way in the 60s in New York, where, sex, love, rock and roll was the milieu. And I find those very powerful and personal.
Kusama is stretching what art can be. And dealing with your hallucinations, paranoia, by using humor, I think is also very interesting. You can really sense Kusama's humor in the green macaroni pants, for example, and the way that she talks about her exhibition in New York, where she covered the floor with macaroni and had people step on it and hear the crackling of the food.
From soft sculptures and crunchy pasta to dots, Kusama's childhood drawings show her mother covered in them, and she speaks of her dotty hallucinations.
私は水玉を、急いで取り込んで描くっていうのじゃなくて、いつも作品を作ると、そうすると水玉になってしまっております。それは私は私の、病から来る サジェッションなのか、または自分がこうしたいと思ったのか、それは私は制作してる時には非常に夢中になってて、他のものは全部ものは全部消えてなくなって、手が作品を作っていくので、私自身はそういった作家たちあまり知らないんで、私自分自身非常に自分のイメージを垣間見ることが結局自分にとって大きな仕事だと思っていました。
Polka dots are a visual device associated with periods of acute anxieties where the world would become clouded or occluded to her, and then she developed that spot to recreate that feeling for the viewer.
Kusama referenced herself as a high priestess of polka dots. It's a very marketable concept, of course, but I think there's so much more to her work.
I think it's the way that it goes in art history. Andy Warhol is known for his Campbell soup cans, but he's so much more as an artist.
In the late 1960s, in the middle of a promising gallery career, Kusama extended her practice to design fashion clothing and shoot an award-winning psychedelic film. She also threw her energy into arresting performative happenings on issues of sexual liberation and political protest. But despite Kusama's active engagements with the New York art world and flourishing fame, she continued to suffer from acute anxieties. By the early 70s, she returned to Japan for a quiet time to heal. Kusama decided to stay for good, in a country where she was virtually unknown as an artist and where she'd have to start from the very beginning.
All keys.